Hello, my dear church boys, and welcome to yet another episode of Saint Robert's Day Game Pickup Podcast. And this week, I want to talk about something that is relevant regardless of whether you day game in one city where you live or you travel around the world and go to different day game cities. It's the difference between day gaming locals and day gaming tourists because there are some major differences. Of course, your basic game will be the same, but if you tweak a few things, you might get way more lays out of your day game adventures. I will talk about how does the set change, how does the conversation change, what you should pay attention to, what are the things you should try to find out during the set. I will talk about how the texting changes because there are some big differences when you text with a tourist who's in town just for a few days or when you're texting with someone who lives there and it just will stay in the city. I will talk about what are the differences in dates and very important, how does pooling change, how does your attitude to pooling and to token last minute resistance change. Well, but before we get into it, as always, let me remind you that in these podcasts, I do them once a week, maybe once in 2 weeks, depending on how much time I have between my students in field coaching, and it's sometimes not enough to share with you everything I want to share. And if there are some other ideas that I have or some other things I want to talk about, I usually talk about that either in our Telegram Day Game Church group chat, or I send it out in the mailing list. So be sure you are subscribed to my mailing list because there are things that I don't put out in the podcasts. Like if there are some things, some content I'm creating, I might first publish it to the mailing list and then months later I will make it public to everyone else. So make sure you are subscribed to my mailing list. Just go to strobert.blog, strobert.blog, and fill out any of the forms on that website. And another important thing to talk about is if you are on my mailing list, you have seen that I've been sending out emails this week about the importance of doing 25 sets in a week and how and why that is so important to get good at day game. If you are starting out, that's the number one thing you should focus on. You should focus on doing 25 sets in a week. And also important, I've noticed that the students that got the most results, not during the coaching but long term, were the students that were doing sets consistently even before they came for in-field coaching. So even if you are considering in-field coaching and you're saying, oh yeah, I will do my sets when I'm with the Robert, I highly suggest you first get to 25 sets or at least do some sets on your own even before you go to the coaching. That's, in my opinion, or I've witnessed it to be a really, really big indicator of how successful in day game a student will be in the long term. A year or a bit more back, I created an online course on how to get to 25 sets in a week. It's a 2 month long program that takes you from doing your first set to doing 25 sets in a week. I will not talk about this on YouTube or on the podcast, but if you are interested in it and if you are not doing 25 sets in a week, then shoot me an email to robert@strobert.blog and I will send you more information. I sometimes am pretty direct about my views on day game and what you have to do to get really good, and this is one of those things. If you are not doing 25 sets a week, the chance of you ever getting good at day game is so slight that you might just as well unsubscribe from my mailing list, stop listening to my podcast, stop listening to anything about day game, and just forget about it. If you're not doing 25 sets a week, or if you are not moving and that's not your number one focus, it will be very, very hard to ever become good at day game. That's how important it is. That being said, let's get down to the podcast. I am sitting down in a lovely park in Riga, enjoying some amazing sunny weather with cute girls being out, and it's just an amazing summer vibe. And let's start this podcast with defining what we call local and what we call a tourist. A local is someone who lives in the city. If a girl lives in a different city and came to the city for a day or two, for whatever reason, I might actually game her as a tourist, especially if she's from a city far away and isn't coming to the capital or whichever city I'm in too often. Which means a tourist is basically someone who is in a city for a few days, maybe a week, and doesn't live there. She can be from another country, she can be from another city in the same country, it doesn't really matter. And what's important, if you think about exchange students, then you should think about exchange students as locals, not as tourists. First, let's talk about locals. What is different or what is important when you're day gaming a local, and what are the typical mistakes I see guys making when day gaming locals? First, let's talk about sets. So, how you should act differently in a set. First of all, unless the logistics are great and she seems very, very on, do not go for insta dates, go for numbers. If she has anything else, if you feel like she's busy, she has shit to do, it's harder to get a same delay with the local than it is with the tourist. And I see guys just seeing that, oh, well, she was so on, we had a great conversation, let's go on an eye date. Well, nice, but you're pretty much wasting your time, because I don't see eye dates affecting how solid the number is and how likely you'll get a response to the feeler message. So don't waste your time on iDates and just go for the numbers. That being said, if logistics aren't perfect, like she's going somewhere, she's going to get her nails done or whatever, but she seems really, really on, those magical sets. If she seems really on, logistics aren't perfect, figure out her logistics for later, figure out what she's doing later. Obviously don't ask there like, hey, what are you doing later? It's better to learn to do it between the lines. And why? Because I've had some amazing cases with girls that were busy at the moment, but I ended up getting same day delays with them later. Same day delay being almost like a same day delay, but there's a gap in between. So you number close, you each go your way, and then you meet later the same day, and you get delay. A long-ish time ago, I was day gaming on one of the main day game streets in Riga, and I saw this cute, kind of hipsterish chick walking down the street, and I think she gave me a slight IOI, and I opened her, and we had a really great set. She was really into it. She was kind of running to go to the bank, so I walked with her. She needed cash because she was going to do something that she needed cash for. She didn't say what it is, but you can pay with the card. And I decided after, I don't know, like 7-8 minute long set, I went for the number, knowing that she had to do some stuff and I had to do some stuff as well. But we started texting, and a few hours later she was done with whatever she was doing, and we ended up going for some drinks. And she said she can't drink beer or wine, and I instantly realized, okay, the procedure she was going for, she was actually going to get a tattoo done. So a few hours later, she has a fresh tattoo, and we're going for some stronger liquor. We're going on a date, and it ended up as a same-day delay, where she's still like, when you get a tattoo, they usually put a piece of plastic. It may be saran wrap or something else on top of it. So she was coming straight from the tattoo, and it still had the plastic on while we were banging. So that was kind of hilarious. And another case was in one of the main shopping malls in the center of Riga. I was walking with my wing, and I saw this really beautiful chick in a military style. Looked kind of serious, but gave me an IOI. I went in, I opened, and she just melted. She was so on. It was just unbelievable. But she was going for a job interview. She had just returned from Norway, where she was living. And I realized she was incredibly on, but I didn't see any way I could do something at that moment because she was in a rush and she was already late. So I seeded the idea to meet later, but didn't really agree on anything specific. And I took the number, I texted her, and we met that evening. She actually had agreed to meet her friend, which she flaked on. She didn't go see the friend just to go and see me. We went on a date, and it ended with a very nice same-day delay. The funny thing is, I was walking down the street in Riga, and I see this car coming out of the park, and I see that I know the girl driving the car, but I can't remember who she is. So I walk up to the car, we exchange like all the basic chit chat that you do when you meet someone you know, and I still had no idea who she was. But I didn't ask. I thought, well, maybe I'm not remembering something and it will be really awkward. So I go home and I still can't remember shit. And a few days later, I wake up in the middle of the night and I realize, oh my god, that was the military chick I had the same day delay with. So be careful when you meet girls and you don't remember where you know them from. So these are the main differences in sets when it comes to number closing. If she's local, go for the number. Don't go for iDates unless the logistics are perfect and she's incredibly on. And if you see she's really on, but the logistics aren't perfect, try to set up a date later for the same day and go for the same day delay. Next, let's talk about texting with locals. This is where many people make mistakes, especially when they start traveling. And when you travel or where you game tourists that are in town for just a few days, yes, the texting is very different. It's faster. You're kind of making mistakes, but they're not mistakes just because of your limited time you have with her. So when texting with locals, this is really important. Do the classic texting. Don't date request too soon. Date request when she answers good. Don't be needy. If she's not answering that well, don't date request. If she's answering long and asking questions and answering fast, boom, go for the date request. Remember, she lives in the same city, she has a life, she has stuff to do, she's probably pretty busy. So don't be needy. Neediness is one of the biggest turnoffs you can do. And slightly contradicting what I said about sets, but in texting, do not date request on the same day you got the number. When you date request on the same day you get the number, it's very needy. Even if you are date requesting for another day, you will either get a date on the same day that will be very likely to end as a same day delay, or you will burn the number. Most of the times I date request on the same date. I learned this the hard way. I date requested too soon and I burned so many numbers, even if she seems on. Unless you're going for the same day delay, do not date request on the same day. What about dates? What is important when you go on a date with a local? Well, of course, as always, try to go for the first date. Like, you should always try to get the lay on the first date. Try to escalate verbally, try to escalate physically, try to pull, try to sleep with her, but don't burn the bridges. Because you can always try to have the second date, but I have really mixed opinions about this, so I'll tell both sides of my opinion. Like, there is something that I would suggest to a beginner day gamer, or it depends on where you are at. If you're scared to pull on the first date, you should obviously try to pull on the first date. Is it optimal? Well, no, not really. But if that's your big roadblock right now, that's what you should focus on fixing. And the idea, the image you want to project on a date, you don't want to go 100% badass. Obviously, you want to be way more of a bad boy than you probably are, because most of the guys learning day game are pretty much nice guys and should be more badass. But there is a possibility to overdo the badass. So what I do, I definitely have overdone the badass in the past, and I kind of try to find a balance. I kind of do the 50% badass and 50% high value guy, so that you have a chance to go on a second date if you feel she is really shy. For example, I went on a coffee date one day with a chick that doesn't drink at 6 p.m. and I realized she was very, very shy and wouldn't open up. And she had some plans to go to another city, and I had a feeling that I could kind of make her bail on those plans and do one more venue and try to pull and try to sleep with her. But I didn't even try to pull. I didn't even do the second venue. I realized it would have been too much work. We did the second date, and I invited her on the second date straight to my place. But even though she stayed over, I didn't get further. Actually, in the evening and during the night, I didn't even get to the kiss. We only kissed the next morning. But then she came over for the third date. We had a very nice lay, and she was a regular of mine for a while. Even though she was shy, she had incredible deep throating skills, had no problems with being in front of camera, and she was just an amazing regular. This is one side or one view, one way you can view this situation. But another case was where I was walking along the street in Riga and I saw this very beautiful girl, kind of princessy, very nice, had a great set. And we started texting, and she was going to a theater. And if you have been listening to my podcast for a while, you have actually probably heard about her. But the most important details are she was going to the theater, and theater ended at like 9:30 p.m. And we ended up going on a date around 10 p.m. the same day. We had a conversation on the street. She was very shy. We did the first venue. She wouldn't let me touch her at all. Really, really shy girl, wouldn't open up. Still, I was in a mood to pull. I was in a mood to do the work, do the hard work. We did one more venue, or I think we did instead of a second venue, we did the park, because the first venue was in the park. Then we just went in the park to chill out. As a second venue, I pulled for cooking, although it was really late. And with a lot of work and a lot of token last minute resistance, it did end with delay. Never sober again though, because when you know you will have to do a lot of work and there will be a lot of token last minute resistance, she might have buyer's remorse the next morning, so you kind of have to be careful with that if you want to see her again. So these are the two ways you can view this situation. You can either say, okay, well, she's here, I don't have to push too hard, I can go I can do the date in the easy mode and then try to get delay on a second or the third date. Or you can just try to pull, do the work and get delay. Honestly, I prefer to burn the lead on the first date instead of doing more dates. I've always had this view that I would rather have another first date with a different chick than go on a second date with a chick that I didn't sleep with on the first date. But as I said, I have mixed feelings, and it's up to you to decide how you want to play this. I think those are the most important things you should know about Daygaming locals. So don't go on iDates unless the conditions are perfect. Text using the classical texting model. Don't do anything fancy. Don't try to set up dates fast. And if you do, then only go for it if you are really sure you can get the same day delay. And yeah, don't over push during the date if you are not ready to burn the lead. And now let's talk about tourists. The most important thing with tourists is that it's much easier to get a same day lay with a tourist than it is to go on a regular date and then get delay. So you should always try to go for same day lays. Tourists are for the same day lay game. I remember a case when I was coaching a student mid-January this year in Prague. And when doing demos, I had done 7 sets, and we finished the coaching. And I said to the student, "Listen, I'll go and do some sets for myself. If you want, you can go and listen to my sets, but don't learn from them too much, because the sets I do for myself are very, very different from the sets I do as demos." So, uh, and the first set I open is this cute Russian chick. We do the set. We start the set in English because even though I speak fluent Russian, I do most of my sets with Russians in English. And when they hook, when they are investing, I switch to Russian because they have already hooked, they have invested, they have done the work, and now I can, as a kind of like a reward, start speaking in Russian. And what happened, we are talking with the chick and she was just going for a walk, exploring Prague. She had arrived not too long ago and she pretty much said, let's go for a walk. So she pulled me for an Insta date. We ended up going for an Insta date, then we went for one drink, we went for another drink in another venue, and it obviously ended as a nice, beautiful same day lay. It was her first solo trip outside of Russia. She was, I think she was 18 or 19, something like that, from Moscow, and it was just nice. And she had a guy waiting for her in Prague. She was supposed to meet some guy. She did meet him the next day. I got an angry voice message from the guy a few days later. It was in Czech, so I have no idea what he said. But what I did, I actually played the message to Google Translate and tried to translate it, but I didn't get much out of it. But the lesson of the story is, boom, always go for Insta dates with tourists. Whenever you feel that logistics are good enough, she is walking around, she doesn't have plans for later. Even if she does, fuck it. Just if logistics are good enough, always try to go for a night date and try to go for a same day lay. And this leads us to the next thing I want to talk about. If you leave your place and are not ready for a same day lay, you will regret it one day. I remember I was coaching a student last autumn, again in Prague. He was a student from Estonia, and he goes, this is the second day, set number 40 total in his life, and he opens this cute chick from, I don't remember where she was from, I think UK, and she's in town and they go on a night date, and the student is leading. He says, oh, I know a really cool bar down the street. Obviously he doesn't know a bar, he's just leading, he's just being very alpha, so that's very good. So he's leading and he says, oh, this is an amazing bar. They go in the bar, and he didn't see that the bar he chose as a date venue was Hooters and was pretty surprised when he walked in. But anyways, he does the first venue, he goes then to a second venue, which is a cocktail bar right underneath his apartment. I'm sitting in the same bar, he has the microphone, I have the earpiece, I'm listening to the date, I'm sending him text messages, talk about this topic, touch her like this, escalate like this, seed like this. And I tell to him, dude, she's ready, you have to pull now, do you have condoms? And he says, no, I don't. Well, do you have condoms in your apartment? No. So I ended up going to the store, buying condoms, calling him and saying, hey dude, tell her you have to take a call, come outside and get the condoms. And he ended up getting a very nice lay. I think it was his first day game lay, his first same day lay, and on his second day of day game coaching, his set number 40. And another story was from, I think it was March this year, right before COVID started. I was coaching a student from Spain, also in Prague. I have coached so many students in Prague that I don't really want to coach anyone there anymore. It's just I'm so tired of the city. But anyways, I am coaching the student from Spain in Prague, and we were staying in the same Airbnb. We had a huge 2-bedroom Airbnb, and he always had problems waking up early enough, and was always leaving the place really messy. So we go out and he goes on a date with this girl from, I think it was Iran, Iraq, or something like that. And they go on a night date, they do the venue 1, and it's really good. And I realized he has to go for venue 2 and he has to try to pull her home. And when they're going for venue 2, I asked, hey, like, is your room ready for a pool? And he just says, oh no, it's such a mess. So what happened is I had to go, while he was in venue 2, I had to go back to the Airbnb and clean up the apartment and prepare the place so he could pull the girl. He did pull, but he didn't get the same delay in this case. So when you are leaving your apartment, whether you are really doing a day game session, you're going out to do 10 sets, or whether you are going to the grocery store, this is actually important. Even if you're going for the grocery store, make sure your place is tidy enough, because you never know. You might be going to a grocery store, seeing a chick, opening her, and getting the same delay. Crazy shit has happened in my experience. I mean, I've had a case where I'm going out of my apartment building, and as I open the building doors, there is a kind of confused chick in white dress with plastic flowers right in front of the door. She's like so confused, and I start a conversation, and 5 minutes later, we are having coffee in my apartment. So regardless of where you're going, have your place ready for same day LA, make sure you have condoms, etc., etc., etc. So the most important thing with tourists when it comes to sets is figuring out their logistics during the set. Obviously, don't ask like, hey, what are you doing now? It's like I don't like such a direct approach, but like between the lines, you can say, oh, you were so happy. It seems like you were going, I don't know, some crazy museum. And she says, oh no, I was just taking a walk, I was thinking about getting a beer. Boom, go for a same day, go for a night date. So figure out her logistics. If logistics are good enough, go for an I date. Number one thing in sets for tourists. When it comes to texting, it's a bit tricky with tourists. Why? Because, well, she has shit to do. She's there probably for a few days. If she's a solo tourist, she very likely is like doing a few days in one city, then going to the next, to the next, to the next. That's what a lot of tourists do. She has shit to do, is there for a short time, and there are many things spiking her emotions, many things she is experiencing. So the emotional spike you gave her by opening is just one of the things that has happened with her in this city. So if you are number closing, then text fast, date request fast. Don't worry about losing the lead. If she's there for a few days, you have to go on a date the same or the next day. It just has to be fast. So yes, you will be making texting mistakes, because that's the only way you can get her out fast enough. And if you burn the lead, then burn the lead. Yes, I actually can't remember number closing and banging a tourist. If I went through my leads to my lays, I would probably find a story, but I can't remember a story top of my head where I number closed and banged the tourist afterwards. So it's mostly same day lays, so text fast, get her out fast, and that's it. Dating is also a little bit different with tourists. Well, it doesn't have to be different, but the better you get at day game, the better you get at small things that make big differences. Remember I told you about the way you are showing yourself as either badass or a high value guy. So if with locals, I go with 50-50, 50% badass and 50% high value dude. Then with tourists, I go more on the badass side. I do, let's say, 2/3 badass and 1/3 high value guy. Don't worry too much about leaving any good impressions, any nice guy vibes. It's not necessary. First of all, it's not necessary too much in general, but especially with tourists, it is not necessary. What is also important, if you feel the chance of a date is low, when you date a local, you might go on another date with her. It's very different when you are with a tourist. If you feel she needs more comfort, don't leave it for another day because she's leaving. What you can do is, let's say you are at venue 2 when you feel, yeah, she's kind of on, but not enough. Well, don't let her go. Do more venues. Go do a third venue. Maybe get a bottle and go to a park. Obviously, you understand logistics, you understand leading, and that the third venue or the second venue or the park is closer and closer to your place. You have to understand that. I remember last summer, again, in Prague, as funny as it sounds, all the stories are from Prague. I was doing my day game session and I was going back to my Airbnb, and I see this confused Russian chick sitting on a bench. She looks at me and she says, "Hey, sorry, do you speak Russian?" And she asked it in Russian. She was shy to speak English. And I do. She kind of opened me because she didn't have data and she couldn't find her hostel. But I looked at her and thought, well, she's kind of cute. I might go for it. So I start teasing her a lot, and she likes it, and we start having a great conversation. End up walking to her. We end up walking to her hostel, leaving her bag, and going for an eye date. And we spent the rest of the day together. We went for a tiny walk. We went for a drink. And then instead of second venue, we got a bottle of something similar to Jägermeister, but Czech version, which is like 5 times cheaper. And I took her to a nice park, which wasn't too far from my place, and we chilled out there. It was already dark, so we were laying in the grass, chilling out, enjoying the great vibes. I went for the pool, but I couldn't pool. She wouldn't come in to my place. But we met again the next day, and I think she had 2 more days booked in the hostel. But as we were walking around the second day evening and having some drinks, I just told her at one point, I say, we're going to your hostel, we're taking your bag, and for the next 2 nights you're staying at mine. And that's what we did. We had 2 really cool days together, and it was just another really nice lay story. And to build more comfort in that story, as you understand, I used the bottle in a park, just laying in the grass and having a great time. And each venue we did, we moved closer and closer to my place. So you can always use that if you use there is not enough comfort. But just as in this story, it doesn't mean it will work out and you will get the same delay. Because in this story, I ended up getting delay on the next day. And the last topic I want to touch upon briefly is if you are a traveler day gamer, if you are a traveling day gamer, well, if you're a tourist but they live in the city, you should game them as locals. Don't mistake you being in a city for a few days with day gaming everyone as if they were tourists. It's still the same rules. If you day game a tourist, day game her as a tourist. If you day game someone who lives there, day game her as someone who lives there. Of course, you will lose many leads, especially if they are local, because, well, if you are in town for a few days, you can't expect to text fast and get them out. So you will have to push your luck. You will have to text faster, and you will have to get them out sooner than expected. But that's why it's so hard to get lays when you are in a city just for a few days. Much better option is to go on longer day game trips. I don't like going on a day game trip just for a few days. I prefer being in a city for several weeks. First of all, it's much easier to day game, and second, I just like to get to know the city. But obviously, depending on where you're from and what your work situation is, it might not be optimal for you. If you do have a 9 to 5 and only limited vacation days, of course, I think it's better to do more shorter trips throughout the year instead of just doing one big day game trip. So if you have to stick to several short ones, okay, then you just will have to lose a lot of leads because you are in the city for a few days. But if you can, and this is something to really think about if you want to start living a way more interesting life, if you really wanna start traveling more and doing more fun stuff on day gaming more, maybe you should think about ways how you can start to slowly move your work to being more location independent. Maybe you can agree with your employers, with the company you work for, if you have a job, about some way you could work remotely for a week, and you do 1 week of vacation and you add 1 week of remote work to your trip. This is what some of the day gamers do. They know which time they have time of the day they have to be online, so they can't go too far away from their city. But I know guys from New York who go to Europe, and if it's Western or Central Europe, the time difference is good enough so they can still get work done and enjoy their day game trip at the same time. So guys, go out, do some sets, implement the advice from this podcast, and let me know how it goes, either by sending me an email or just posting your experiences in the Day Game Church Telegram group chat. If you are listening to this on iTunes, or actually whichever flat platform you use to listen to podcasts, please, if you like this podcast, go to your platform and leave this podcast a 5-star review. It helps more guys discover my podcasts so I can help them improve their day game. And if you have a wing that you think should listen to this podcast, maybe you are thinking about going on a day game trip with your wing, or you live in a city with many tourists and think he should know these tips, then please send him this episode and help him with his day game.